Welcome to episode 22 of the Exert Cruise Show. My name's Chris, he's Anthony, and today we're doing something a little bit different. 22 episodes of the Exert Cruise Show, and we are now almost 6 months in. And there's almost an entire day's worth of content across all of these different episodes.
We do this every week, a chance for the nerds amongst us who love a cruise, relish cruise day, to kind of come together and do a deep dive debrief and a level of nuance and analysis that you might not find amongst your social group.
So the two of us thought, why don't we trawl through the archive and find 7 different topics that you might have missed in the Exert Cruise Show to answer some of these recurring questions. So I hope you enjoy this compilation edition, special edition 22 of the Exert Cruise Show, where we're going to answer some of your most burning questions by looking back through the archive. So the first one is all about anomaly cabins, which is something that Anthony is quite an expert at. And that is finding cabins that are different to all the other cabins on the ship, but often the same price or in fact even cheaper.
Like I said, on a crossing, I like to be low and midships where possible. And originally, the other thing is I also like to pay for something like a transatlantic crossing. I like to... I really like to just pay as little as possible because I'm the kind of person that I can find joy in anything.
Yeah.
I can find absolute joy. So just get me on the ship. Even put me in a crew cabin if necessary. I know how to have fun.
You should start doing guest lecturing.
I would love to do guest lecturing and that I'm sure is in our future. Maybe we could do a joint one. But I very much feel like just getting on board is all that matters, because if you know anything about, cruises and travel, you really don't spend that much time in your cabin.
Yeah.
And there are people who only book inside cabins, and you should remember that an inside cabin can be half the price of a balcony cabin, or even less.
Sometimes though, you, as you say, you find these anomalies. I know a few on the Vista class that are significantly larger than their Ocean View counterparts. Like they are big cabins. Yeah.
So initially, I booked a midship deck 4 balcony cabin, a standard. I think it was an obstructed balcony cabin. I think they call it DB. And again, you want to find one that's between the lifeboats. And if you go on cruisedeckplans.com, they actually show you on some ships the view out of the window. I think Queen Elizabeth is pretty much mapped all the way down one side now. So you can see exactly what view you get out of your balcony. And I've always opted for an obstructed balcony. I think that's a perfect cabin because if you choose the right one, it's not that obstructed. And you make quite a saving. So I was initially in one of those. But as you said at the beginning of the show, when I booked it was so far out that the prices were quite high. And so I have these alerts set up on a website called Cruise Line, and it was sending me alerts that the price was going down. I was like, this is ridiculous. So unlike with Royal Caribbean or Celebrity, who will just reduce the fare, Cunard have to unbook you and rebook you.
Really?
And so, every time I was doing it, I was having to move cabins. So I was kind of moving around deck 4 midships.
I bet you they love it when you call.
Oh, they love it. They're like, uh-oh, not this guy again. He's trying to pay less.
He's back.
So eventually, obviously, we're running out of cabins now because the ship's filling up, and I'm still trying to get the price down. And initially, I think I saved, because of the 4 times I rebooked this trip, I think I saved around $1,000 by doing this, so it was worth it.
Yeah.
But eventually they said, okay, we've only got 2 cabins left. You can either have, I think it was 4072, which was on the port side, which was was fine, again, an obstructed balcony. Or you can have 4060 or 4060 or 4058. And I had a look at the plan, and I saw that the cabin, instead of it being that way, was this way. And it meant that the balcony was 18 feet long.
Amazing.
For a regular like obstructed balcony view.
Yeah.
And I was like, hang on a second. What's the catch? There's got to be a catch. So I look at it and I discover that instead of it being the standard size, I think the standard size on those cabins is, I'm trying to remember the square footage. I think it's something like 180 square feet on the standard balcony cabins. But on this one, 180 feet, and the balcony's 48 feet. On this one, the cabin was around 268 square feet, and the balcony was like 75 feet or something.
Yeah. And that's that thing where there's some reason why they've had to turn the cabin that way,
right,
to allow for piping or services to go down. I actually saw one of them at the shipyard when the ship was being built, and the lead of our who was briefing us, he actually pointed it out and said there's a few special ones dotted about the ship, but because of course everything was open, you could see all these massive pipes and cables and stuff because they need to run it through, just like when you're on a plane and there's a window missing because of all the wiring and stuff's going there,
right.
And if you know to look, you're going to get this delightful room. It's probably better than all the others, even in the configuration.
Well, I had friends who were up in the Queen's Grill, and they had exactly the same size cabin.
Yeah.
The only difference was they had a much bigger bathroom behind it, and they had a wall in the middle with a TV on each side.
Yeah, yeah.
But this cabin, I was in 4060, deck 4. It was also on its own in the corridor. There was nothing opposite it, and there was nothing either side of it.
Yeah, okay.
And it was on a bend. It was fantastic. And there was no obstruction. That was the other thing. There was just no obstruction.
You found it.
So 4060, 4061, they're really the best cabins to get. If you go to 4058 and 4059, they have a bit of an overhang from deck 5, and the same with 4056 and 4057, I think.
Yeah.
So that's just a little tip-off that if you're going on Queen Anne, you don't need to spend an awful lot of money to be upstairs, and low midship is obviously very helpful, but find the anomaly cabins because every ship has maybe a dozen anomaly cabins, and it's often a much more fun experience, especially if you're traveling with friends and you're like, oh, come and see our cabin. My friends who'd paid 3 times what I'd paid upstairs, they came in and they were like, oh, it's kind of like our cabin. And I was like, yeah. So this is the
Did you have the price
detail.
tag just lying there on the table so they could see,
I left it on the door outside. Never mind the pineapple. I just put the price of the trip on the door. The only thing it was missing was a sofa. It had a large chair and a table,
probably because
but there was
shape.
actually nowhere to put the sofa.
Yeah.
But that really didn't matter. I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever sat on the sofa in a cruise cabin.
Well, I mean, if you got a balcony, you wouldn't need it, would you, really?
Yeah, exactly. And so we got to use the balcony for the first few days before the weather got bad. And then, obviously, for the arrival into New York, they get into New York earlier and earlier and earlier. It used to be 6 a.m. Now it's like 4:30.
Yeah, it's a shame.
And so nobody wants to get up at that time. So this is an advantage of having a balcony, is that we just like wrapped ourselves over our pajamas and went out onto our own balcony and filmed the Statue of Liberty and then got back into bed. Yeah.
Of the Statue of Liberty, yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how you can make a ship and a trip work for you.
Sticking with an early episode, and in episode 2, all the way back when we first launched the show, we had an in-depth discussion about what it's like in the crew areas on board the cruise ships. This is a question I get lots on the channel, and I've had a little bit of experience at this because I did travel as a guest speaker in crew accommodation on one particular voyage back in 2019. It's funny because as a guest speaker, I do lectures on cruise ships, and Cunard, for example, which is the one I've worked with the most, they put you up in a passenger cabin in passenger accommodation. But some of the other cruise lines that I've done work for, it's like hit and miss as to what kind of accommodation you're going to get. Sometimes you get passenger rooms, but if the ship is full, you get what they consider to be sort of an entertainer or an ENTS cabin or ED cabin, entertainment department, and these ones can sometimes be in the crew areas, and they're kind of dressed up to look like passenger cabins, but they're not the same kind of quality. And on this one particular voyage, it was actually on board a P&O Cruises UK ship. We were berthed in one of these rooms, and of course it's surrounded by other entertainment cabins, but there's also crew areas. But you go outside of the passenger area into the crew only part of the ship and start walking down the main corridors and seeing sort of the crew amenities to get to your room. And this particular one, it wasn't right next to, but it was several doors up from this very ominous looking door that had mortuary written on it. And like the world behind the scenes is very much different to what the passengers see on a daily basis. And of course, that room itself, it had twin portholes. It had the deadlights on the portholes because it was quite low down in the ship. It was bunks. Now, I'm almost 2 meters tall. The bunks were interesting to try and get in and out of. And just outside it, there was sort of a staging area where they would bring in equipment from when they were boarding stores and stuff. So we get there and there's all these big like pallets set up, and it smelt like a little bit like some sort of detergent smell that was running through the area, and very, very different from that beautifully decorated passenger area. But of course, the crew on so many of these ships have been used to that for so long.
Right.
Then you look at what Virgin's doing, and they're actually putting some decoration into the crew areas. Yeah. It is quite a difference.
And they're also giving single cabins to crew as well. There's less sharing going on. And what they have a kind of clever system, and this is also on the Icon class now, is they have a shared bathroom between two single cabins. So the bathroom has Jack and Jill doors, and as long as you have an agreement with the person that you're sharing the bathroom with as to who's going to use it and when, and obviously you can lock it from the inside. But that's a much better way of doing it, to give some privacy to people. And so I think about the crew all the time. And also my mum used to work as crew on board the ship selling jewellery, and she did it for 10 years, and so I got all the intel.
Now, this is one that Anthony has a lot of experience with, because I've never travelled on a ship where I've had a butler before, but he has. And we did ask the question in an early episode, are butlers actually necessary on board a cruise ship?
Because I grew up in London and I worked in hospitality, and I worked at the Savoy, and I worked at Claridge's, and I worked at the Dorchester, and I worked at all of these places that kind of instigated silver service. And they also started the butler service. And so when you get a butler, I think is it Emirates that does it? When you get a butler in first class on Emirates, they say, they've been trained by the Savoy. If you were to book, say, the Retreat on Celebrity Cruises, and you get a butler, I doubt very much that butler has been trained by the Savoy. And this goes back...
It's a different product.
Different product. And this goes back to what we were saying in the first episode last week about how the Cunard waiting staff doing White Star service are not getting the kind of training that was typical decades ago, and that standards have slipped. But I believe it's because customers are less discerning, and because, the average person isn't going to Claridge's. I mean, I would never go to those places as a customer. I was there because I worked. Occasionally, maybe I used to get like a coupon for a 3-course meal at the Savoy for £35 that included a glass of champagne, and I'd spend all day there for that. But the quality of service, the ability to just kind of look up and know that there are waiting staff who are looking at you all the time. Waiting, exactly as you described. So that you don't have to kind of do the wave, which my parents do in such an embarrassing fashion, or the signing the check in the air. Can we get the check, please? Shouldn't have to do any of that stuff. You should just be able to just do that. And the communication line is so nuanced and so bespoke. So that all I'm saying is, I'm just drawing a comparison, that is it worth paying the extra for things like the Retreat and the ship within a ship concept, when even though they call it a butler, and I have friends who have done that, and they've done it on Celebrity and they've done it on Cunard, and they say, we didn't really know what our butler was there for. Like, we didn't really have anything for him to do. It was kind of embarrassing. We had to go looking for a pair of shoes to give him to go shine. And And also, I don't know about you, but I personally would be very embarrassed to have somebody that was called a butler around. I just
Yes.
socially, I just feel that those days, the days of servitude in that way, should be confined to the past. And so, the only reason I'm saying this is because that high standard of service, silver service, both in the dining room and just generally, are really only available if you're paying $500, $600, $700 a night at these London hotels. And I'm sure New York has an equivalent, Paris has an equivalent. But what's the point in having the fake version on the ships? Like, is it worth paying for the fake version?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be better off just
really
going to London for a vacation and getting the real deal?
I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the delightful things about cruising, particularly from the 80s and 90s and even into the early 2000s, was that regardless of many brands, regardless of what category you were in, there was a minimum service level that you would receive in the dining rooms. Now, if you think about some of the finer brands through that period, through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, like when I first started traveling on cruise ships, even in the standard dining room on a luxury brand company that says it's a luxury brand, you would get in the lowest of the tier of the dining rooms, you would get 2 wait staff at your table. You would have, obviously it was set seating, so they knew who you were from the start, and they got to know you, they got to know your likes. We would walk in. My sister has knife and fork the opposite way around to how it's usually laid out. We would walk in, her place was set from day 2. They knew your dietary requirements from day 2 because you told them on day 1. There was sommelier walking around who would actually do the tastings with you. Like, they had the little thing around their neck. I don't even know what it's called, but they would do that whole setup, and they were trained as sommelier. The maitre d' would get to know you at the entrance. There was assistant waiters who would come around and learn the tables in their area and start to interact with the passengers. And the whole thing was a spectacle. So it was this remarkable experience of, once you went into the dining room, you were going into this special world where it was that kind of level of service that really couldn't be found easily at that price point anywhere else. So you could get it at these luxury hotels, but for $100 a day in an inside cabin, you just wouldn't get that sort of service. Now, I've really noticed that since, well, I guess for the last 10 years or so, but particularly post-pandemic, a lot of that has been dumbed down, and this move to having any freestyle dining, which is wonderful in some respects, don't get me wrong, but when you have these grand multi-story dining rooms on these cruise ships that were designed for everyone to come together and have an atmosphere that's just electric, and then you change it to this, like, come and go wherever you want, upper level's different to lower level. I noticed on the open dining, the staff are stressed. The wait staff don't know who they're serving. You have to explain your dietary requirements each time.
That's right. And they throw the food at you because they're so busy. They can't.
The next people are waiting. They've got a buzzer waiting for the buzzer to go off.
Now, if you've been watching the show for any amount of time, you'll know that we're very fond of the Edge class from Celebrity Cruises. And we did a special edition where we spoke exclusively about one of the world's greatest cruise ship designs, and that is, of course, the Edge class. So today we're having a little bit of a look at some of the features that make the Edge class stand out.
The thing about the Edge class is that you don't need to spend much money to get a premium experience. The inside cabins are still 200 feet. They have exactly the same furniture, exactly the same layout. You're not missing a sofa. You're not missing a big TV. You're not missing a marble bathroom. Like, the inside cabins, which are cheap or cheapest, are the same as almost every category until you get to a Sky Suite. And this is what's so interesting. And the Sky Suite will sell for, like nearly $10,000 for a week's sailing sometimes. And oddly, a Sky Suite is only 300 square feet rather than 200 square feet. So the bed kind of faces a big balcony, but it's only 100 feet bigger, and the furniture is exactly the same as in an inside cabin. So even though it's a suite, and even though you get access to the retreat, and even though you get a butler, and even though you get drinks included and stuff like that, the actual cabin itself,
the hard product,
is identical to the inside cabin. I think you just get like one extra seat, like a single lounge seat.
Sure.
But otherwise, it's exactly the same. And for me, the difference between 200 square feet and 300 square feet, it's kind of not really worth it. So if you can get in on the lowest level, and the ocean view, as I say, is a great cabin, deck 3, if you can get midships, deck 3 on an Edge class, there's only cabins on deck 3, nothing on deck 2. Deck 3, there's a lot of these ocean view cabins. You don't want to be on the side of the magic carpet, because that thing is going up and down, and also when you dock, that ocean view window is right by the dock side, literally, like you can see people, their faces are almost like at your height, so
I suspect I'm going to experience that. I suspect I'm going to experience that firsthand in October, because I'm doing a lecture trip on board Celebrity Edge, and the cabin they allocate the guest speakers is guest ocean view, but I imagine they'll give us the ones that don't sell.
Well,
so
it's interesting.
It'll probably be that one.
They actually consider the ones in the middle to be kind of a deluxe ocean view, but there's no different.
Sure.
And what I would be inclined to choose is around about room 3188, if I remember the plan off the top of my head. You also have, and this is another tip, a public bathroom right at the entrance to this secret corridor where these cabins are. Now, as we all know, if we are traveling with our partners and, one of you's like desperate for the loo and the other one like is getting dressed and stuff for dinner or something, you can't like plonk in the toilet for 20 minutes to make yourself feel better and stink out the cabin. And I'm being as respectful as I can with my language, but this is the reality of traveling by ship. But there's a public bathroom literally just down the corridor. And so I think about these things because, when you're in a small space, you really need to consider, and I've seen this on cruise vlogs where people go, oh, that's my favorite public bathroom. And exactly, it's a male, and they obviously, it comes fresh from the buffet, and they're like, that's where I like to go and, do my business. But I think that Deck 3 Ocean View cabin on the Edge class, it's the second cheapest cabin. It's right near the restaurants. So, all four restaurants, as we know, are aft, and you are literally just a few seconds away from that. You've got the public bathrooms, but then if you go forward, you got a secret entrance, effectively, to guest services and then to the atrium. And so it's actually a really good place to be. Just be on the port side so that rather than starboard, because starboard is where the magic carpet is and where they would dock. So you're going to see the faces of people refueling the ship looking at you whilst you're stretching in the morning.
Make sure your windows drawn.
Right. But that's why I think Edge is a perfect ship, because you're getting a 200-foot cabin for the least amount of money. And as you know, I don't think we should be spending as much as they want us to spend on these ships. I think that I believe in these types of trips being accessible to families and to people who don't have great riches. And so really all the way up, the infinite verandas are polarizing. Some people don't like the fact that it's this big kind of glass panel that you have to press a button and you have to wait for 5 minutes for the thing to open, and it makes an awful lot of noise. So if your partner's asleep in the morning and you want to get up and open the infinite veranda, like it's very antisocial, right? So you have to think about these things. So that's why I think the Edge class is the perfect ship. We discussed last week, you have these 4 main dining restaurants that are designed like speciality, so you don't need to be upsold to speciality restaurants. The food is fantastic. The ship is stunning, like the interior design. Was it Kelly Hoppen that did the interiors?
I think so, yeah.
Absolutely stunning design, and of course Eden is the icing on the cake. So I would say that a cheaper cabin on Edge is going to be a far superior experience to going on to a lot of the other lines and a lot of the other ships.
Sticking with Celebrity, and the Solstice class, which was its previous generation of cruise ships, is just about to have something really exciting happen, and you might have missed this.
That Celebrity are going to be upgrading or renovating their entire Solstice class ships, starting with the Solstice itself in March 2026, which I think you're going to be going on shortly afterwards, which means you're going to get to see what it's like. And I've often, we talk about Celebrity a lot. It's my favorite of the lines to travel on, but I've always said that the Solstice class is such a missed opportunity because these ships are 15, 20 years old now, and they're really showing their age. And I'm so pleased that obviously Celebrity were watching this show and they decided to invest $100 million in every ship. And they're literally gutting those ships. They're going to do a full renovation, including of every single cabin, which is great because, as we said before, the interiors, they look like kind of Marriott hotel from the 80s. And so I'm really pleased that these renovations are happening.
We also did a special episode all about Princess Cruises, which is one of the favorite cruise lines out there. And we get so many comments and so much feedback about Princess Cruises on the channel and also on the Exert Cruise Show. And for this particular clipping, we're asking the question, do the older Princess ships still hold up in modern day cruising?
With Princess, we've got these 5 ships that we've been talking about that really do hold up. But the moment you go to the class before that, they do look a little dated. And now, of course, we have these 2 new Star and Sun Princess ships, which are so fantastic looking. Probably, I was going to say they look iconic, but they look almost more iconic than the Icon class to me. I think that Princess have done a wonderful job with the look and the feel of these giant new ships. They're big, they're 175,000 tons. These ships, they're not like mega ships, but they are mega ships.
They're sizable, yeah. They have a presence. It's interesting when you look at the design of the exterior design. There's elements of the various classes. So there's like the pylons that hold the bridge wings up, which is from the Grand class. And there's the very balcony heavy design, which is from the Royal class. But Princess, from my knowledge, at least from my experience, they haven't done those full refurbishments where they pull everything out. So even on the Royal Princess, which, I think it was 2013, like she's the first in that class, it's that standard plastic Fincantieri bathroom in the balcony cabins. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's like a hospital bathroom,
Exactly, and that's the same on the mini suite I saw on board Crown Princess has got that same sort of. It's got a bath and it had tiled floors, which gives it a bit more, elegance. But it looks its age, I suppose.
And they all have shower curtains. Even the newer ones. I think Sun and Star Princess have glass doors in their bathrooms.
Well, that's the way.
I think. But anything before that on Princess, you're definitely going to have that shower curtain cling to your body with the soap that dries out your skin.
There's no app on the medallion to help you with that, unfortunately. I always used to think to myself, QE2, for example, was refurbished in 1994, and they gave every one of the bathrooms that didn't have a bath a shower door. And if they can do that in 1994 on a ship that was built in 1969, I do not understand why it is not standard across the whole fleet.
It's so funny. Interesting, I think bathroom design has changed. We talked about this before, I talked about these prefabricated marble effect panels that they've started using. Yeah. And they're great for retrofitting because you can literally, redo a bathroom very quickly as Celebrity has done with the Summit, the Millennium class ship. And so, it is possible, but you often think these companies, obviously, these companies have to make a profit, and they do make huge profits. But putting that money back into the ships, it happens occasionally. And the fact that Celebrity have just announced that 5 ships are going to be getting a full renovation, it's probably going to take a couple of years at least to get those done, if not longer.
I'm so glad Solstice is the first because I was looking forward to. I'm looking forward to now going on board after the changes. You made me feel a bit nervous in episode 4 when you were talking about.
I didn't enjoy Solstice because it was so dark. I didn't. To me, it didn't. But they've talked about. I mean, we'll have to do another episode discussing this. But they're really taking advantage of some of those spaces that never got used. There was like a weird quasar nightclub on the Solstice class that never got used. And even the lawns on the top. The grass lawns. I think they're creating some proper outdoor deck space with some beautiful furniture and getting a vibe going, which is great. So look, there's lots to look forward to. There's so many new ships that are coming out.
And to finish off today's special episode, we had a dedicated show all about the RMS Titanic and how Titanic, despite its tragic story, has helped to create an interest and a fascination with cruising. And so this week, we're going to have a little bit of a look at one of the topics that we spoke about. Why is it that Titanic resonates so much with people over 100 years after it sank? And given the tragic end to the Titanic story, why does it make people feel like they might want to go on a cruise?
The story is what gives it its character and gives it, and also the loss of life to me, I think I connect with, the fact that this is the ship that all those people died on.
Yeah.
It's very poignant, it's very sad, it's very moving, and yet it draws us to cruising, and I think that is such an interesting juxtaposition, the fact that we are drawn to cruising. And I wonder if in the back of our mind, especially with maiden voyages, and we can't let an episode of this show go by without me talking about having done 4 Cunard maiden voyages. I think every time I say that, you have to take a shot. That's I think that should be
drunk.
that should be our plan going forward. But and if anyone's done a maiden voyage, especially on the North Atlantic, there is this thing in the back of your mind where you're thinking about Titanic and you're thinking, are we going to make it? Is this ship going to get there? Is this going to play out as the history books want it to? Or will it take a very different turn? And there is a weird, macabre attraction to that, and I can't really describe it better than that.
I think to finish up, one of the greatest illustrations that I have of modern day cruise passengers' love of Titanic, notwithstanding that I've actually been booked to speak on Celebrity, and one of the talks they want is the Titanic talk. But
I love that.
I know. But when I was on Queen Victoria 2 years ago, I think I've told you this before, we had a gap in the schedule that they needed to fill, and they asked if I could do an extra talk. And I said, look, I've got a Titanic talk that always is popular, but I don't know if you'd want to do that on the ship. And they said, yeah, of course we'll do Titanic, but we'll do it in the Queen's room because you're probably not going to get the same sort of scale of audience as your Cunard talks. I said, no. You will definitely get a full house for Queen Victoria. We should do it in the theatre. But for whatever reason, they decided we're going to stick with the I think the theatre might have been having rehearsals or something, so we're going to stick with the Queen's room. Anthony, it was nuts. It was insane. There were people everywhere. The whole ship basically was there.
Team, they are also right now helping us bringing up chairs. So we should soon be starting with our inside lecture. We have our housekeeping team helping.
They had to bring chairs in and fill the dance floor. You actually had people walking in like late and sitting cross-legged on the dance floor. I'd never seen anything like it. And I was with a group of other entertainers, the headline acts for the night, and they were like, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
You are the superstar. And I said, no, Titanic is the superstar.
She sails in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So it's something about our human story and our human condition, I think, that a disaster like that gets not just remembered and talked about, but in some ways romanticized as well.
Do you think they'll be talking about the Costa Concordia in 100 years' time in the same way?
I don't think so, no. I mean, fortunately, as tragic as Costa Concordia was, and it was an absolute, disaster, you didn't have the death toll that you did on Titanic.
Yeah.
Not to take away from, of course, the pain that those people who lost someone would be
but
feeling,
there is a story there.
There is.
With the captain and the mistress and all that stuff that really lends itself to a screenplay. And just the setting. I mean, that's why I guess the Poseidon Adventure was such a successful movie, is because the setting of being on a ship that meets a sticky end is very compelling for people, because I guess we can all imagine how we might behave in that same situation.
Exactly. And I think that's why Titanic, again, it's the combination of that, the fact that it was a passenger voyage, but also that time, and how it was publicized so quickly after the disaster. Because if you look at, say, World War II, not to end we really do have to dock the ship, but not to end it on a sad note, but if you look at World War II, there was like a disaster, say the Lancastria, which was evacuating people, and it had they didn't keep an accurate count because they were in such a rush, but there was over 6,000 people lost when that ship was sunk. But it was sunk in secrecy during the war. The British government didn't want to talk about it because of morale problems. It sunk really quickly. No one's, there wasn't survivors who could tell their story. So we don't think of that ship the same way as we do a ship like Titanic, where it was, as you say, this perfect storm that got it to the iceberg, and then it sank with all these stories unfolding, and just enough people survived to tell the story. I don't think there is another Titanic. I think it is the one that has that allure.
And we should probably finish by reminding people that if it wasn't for the sinking of Titanic, there might not be as many lifeboats on board modern ships as there are. I mean, and you can talk to this better than I can, but, there weren't enough lifeboats for the number of people on Titanic because it was thought that aesthetically it didn't look good to have kind of 2 layers of boats down the boat deck. But now, of course, we have not just these vast lifeboats that are used for tendering. I mean, they're huge, these things. But we also have these barrels on the promenade deck that you often see. And you think, what are those barrels? Well, those barrels get thrown overboard and they become boats.
Yeah.
And there's dozens and dozens of them. There are more than enough lifeboats now. And obviously these ships are designed so that they take much longer to sink, and therefore there is time to evacuate everybody. But if it wasn't for Titanic and the change in maritime law, then it might be a different story now.
It's also a very significant story about how humans behave, because the mindset at the time, notwithstanding aesthetic looks, but the mindset at the time, which was entertained by and formed by experience, was that the ship needed to be made safe enough that it would, if it was going to sink, it would sink so slowly that a rescue ship could come and get the people. And the reason why is, if you think about the North Atlantic, middle of the Atlantic, rough seas, evacuating 2,000 people into open wooden lifeboats was a very, very dangerous prospect. And in fact, many times in the past, before Titanic, they evacuated people into boats, and the boats were swept away, and everyone who was on the boats died, and everyone who stayed on the ship survived. So the mindset was, let's make the ship as safe as possible. We won't need the boats for people to be in the water for hours on end. We only need the boats to ferry people from ship to ship. After Titanic sank, the whole flaw of that paradigm fell out in dramatic fashion. Absolutely flawed way of thinking. But it had proven previous to Titanic to be a sound way of thinking at the time. They thought they were doing the right thing, which again is the nuance of the story. But after Titanic sinks, of course, that one scenario where that mindset doesn't work, and Carpathia arrives too late, the ship in the distance doesn't have its radio on, the ship sinks, terrible loss of life, and they mill pond water, so if there had been enough boats for everyone, potentially they would have been able to save everybody. Then they realize, obviously, that can't be the way we go forward. And ultimately, SOLAS, or safety of life at sea, is brought into provision, which is why we still have rafts and boats on ships the way we do now. You'll actually see the labeling on those rafts, SOLAS. That convention was created after the Titanic sank.
Well, with that, always good to end on a happy note. We'll dock this ship. I want to remind people to go to your new Substack. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's at themaritimhistorian.substack.com, and basically it goes into the sort of stuff we've been talking about today in a lot more sort of detail. Not just Titanic, though it does have a presence there, but also other maritime history stories, because we've actually found, like, my background's maritime history, you love maritime history. This show, we kind of dabble in maritime history, and I would say a good proportion of the comments are not just cruising comments, but also maritime history comments. So you convinced me actually to start writing. We've written books, now let's start writing a Substack and share the stories there. So you can subscribe, you get the articles go straight into your inbox, or you can come and check it out on the Substack there. So there's a QR code on the screen now. If you're watching on a TV, you just scan it and you'll be there.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you again for staying with us on this epic voyage that is the Exert Cruise Show. We'll come back next week and bring you another fresh episode. Don't forget to go back through the catalogue and watch again. Comment down below, share, find us on Instagram as well, and we'll take you to see next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.